February 2nd, 1943. In the frozen ruins of a shattered Soviet city, thousands of German soldiers stumble through snow and rubble. Their uniforms are torn, their faces are hollow. Many have not eaten in days. The once mighty 6th Army of Nazi Germany, one of the most powerful armies on earth, is dying, surrounded, freezing, starving. Only months earlier, Adolf Hitler believed this city would fall within days. German propaganda declared victory inevitable, but now the army that marched across Europe unstoppable is about to surrender. The place where it all collapsed was a city on the Volga River. Its name would become one of the most terrifying words in military history: Stalingrad. This was not just another battle, it was the battle that broke Hitler's war machine and changed the fate of World War II forever. To understand why Stalingrad mattered so much, we need to go back to the summer of 1941. That was when Adolf Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in human history. Over 3 million German soldiers, supported by thousands of tanks and aircraft, stormed into the Soviet Union. At first, it seemed unstoppable. Entire Soviet armies were surrounded and destroyed. Cities fell, millions of prisoners were captured. German generals believed the Soviet Union would collapse within months. But they were wrong. The Soviet state did not collapse. Instead, it absorbed the shock, rebuilt its armies, and kept fighting. By the winter of 1941, the German advance stalled before Moscow. Hitler now needed a new plan, and in 1942, he turned his attention south. His new objective was oil. The German war machine was desperately short of fuel. Without oil, tanks, aircraft, and trucks could not fight. The oil fields of the Caucasus, in southern Russia, became the new target. But on the way to those oil fields stood a city on the Volga River, a city that carried the name of the Soviet leader himself, Stalingrad. For Hitler, capturing it would be more than a military victory. It would be a devastating symbolic blow. In the summer of 1942, the German army advanced toward the Volga. Their spearhead was General Friedrich Paulus's 6th Army, supported by the 4th Panzer Army. Together, they were one of the most powerful forces Germany had ever deployed. They smashed through Soviet defenses. Step by step, they moved closer to Stalingrad. The Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, bombed the city relentlessly. On August 23, 1942, hundreds of German bombers attacked Stalingrad. The city exploded into flames. Entire districts burned. Tens of thousands of civilians died. Within hours, much of Stalingrad had turned into a landscape of shattered buildings and smoking rubble. To German commanders, it seemed like victory was near. But the destruction created something unexpected. Instead of a city easy to capture, Stalingrad had become a fortress of ruins. By September 1942, German troops reached the outskirts of the city. What followed was one of the most brutal urban battles ever fought. Stalingrad became a nightmare of street-to-street combat. Every building mattered, every staircase, every room. Soviet soldiers defended factories, apartment blocks, and railway stations with desperate determination. The fighting was so close that artillery and air power often became useless. German and Soviet soldiers fought only meters apart, sometimes even in the same building. The battle earned a terrifying nickname among German soldiers: Rattenkrieg, the War of Rats. Men crawled through rubble and sewers. Snipers hunted targets across shattered streets. Machine guns fired from broken windows. One Soviet sniper, Vasily Zaitsev, became legendary during the battle. Hidden among the ruins, he hunted German officers and soldiers with deadly precision. Meanwhile, Soviet reinforcements kept crossing the Volga River under constant German fire. Many died before even reaching the shore. But enough survived to keep the defense alive. The Soviet leader Joseph Stalin issued a brutal order, Order number 227. Its message was simple: not one step back. Any soldier who retreated without permission could be executed. The defenders of Stalingrad would fight to the last. By October 1942, the Germans controlled most of the city. They captured key areas: the railway station, much of the city center, large industrial zones. At some points, Soviet defenders held only a narrow strip of land along the Volga River. German soldiers believed victory was close. Some units were only a few hundred meters from pushing the last Soviet defenders into the river, but the battle had already begun to consume the German army. Urban combat was brutally slow, casualties mounted, supplies ran low, and winter was approaching. More importantly, something else was happening beyond the city, something the German High Command completely underestimated. The Soviet Union was preparing a massive counterattack. While the Germans were focused on capturing the city itself, Soviet commanders were planning something far bigger. Instead of attacking the Germans inside Stalingrad, they targeted the weaker forces guarding the flanks. Those flanks were defended mostly by Romanian, Italian, and Hungarian troops, allies of Germany who were less equipped and less experienced. On November 19, 1942, the Soviet counterattack began. It was called Operation Uranus. Thousands of artillery guns opened fire, then waves of Soviet tanks and infantry smashed into the Axis lines. The Romanian armies defending the flanks collapsed quickly. Within days, Soviet forces broke through. Two massive Soviet spearheads raced toward each other. On November 23rd, they met near the town of Kalak. The trap was closed. Inside the pocket were nearly 300,000 Axis soldiers. The German 6th Army was surrounded. German commanders immediately understood the danger. They urged Hitler to allow the 6th Army to break out of the encirclement. But Hitler refused. He believed the army could hold its position. He promised supplies would arrive by air. And he ordered the 6th Army to stay in Stalingrad. It was a disastrous decision. The German Air Force simply did not have the capacity to deliver enough supplies. The army needed over 700 tons of supplies per day. The Luftwaffe could deliver only a fraction of that. Food ran out, fuel disappeared, medical supplies vanished. Winter temperatures dropped to -30 degrees Celsius. German soldiers froze in the ruins of the city they had almost captured. By December 1942, the trapped German army was collapsing. Starvation spread. Frostbite became common. Wounded soldiers often died without treatment. Some units survived on frozen horse meat. Others scavenged scraps of food from destroyed supply depots. Meanwhile, Soviet forces tightened the ring. Attempts to rescue the 6th Army failed. One German relief operation came within about 50 kilometers of the trapped troops, but Paulus never received permission to break out. The opportunity vanished. The pocket grew smaller. German positions shrank day by day. Entire divisions were reduced to a few hundred exhausted soldiers. By January 1943, the situation was hopeless. But Hitler still refused surrender. In late January 1943, Soviet forces launched their final assault. Artillery thundered across the frozen city. Soviet infantry advanced block by block. The remaining German soldiers were starving and exhausted. On January 31st, Soviet troops reached the German headquarters. General Friedrich Paulus surrendered. Hitler had just promoted him to field marshal the day before. The message was clear. No German field marshal had ever surrendered before. But Paulus refused to commit suicide. 2 days later, on February 2nd, 1943, the last German forces in Stalingrad surrendered. The battle was over. The scale of destruction was unimaginable. The Battle of Stalingrad lasted about 5 months. During that time, around 2 million soldiers and civilians were killed, wounded, or captured. Entire armies were destroyed. The city itself was reduced to rubble. Of the roughly 300,000 Axis soldiers trapped, only about 90,000 survived captivity, and only a few thousand of those would ever return home after the war. For Germany, Stalingrad was more than a military defeat. It shattered the myth of German invincibility. For the first time, an entire German army had been destroyed. For the Soviet Union, it was a turning point. After Stalingrad, the Red Army would push westward, all the way to Berlin. Stalingrad changed everything. Before the battle, Germany had been advancing across Europe and the Soviet Union for years. After Stalingrad, the momentum shifted. The German army would never fully recover. From this moment on, the Red Army began a relentless advance toward the heart of Nazi Germany. The road to Berlin started in the ruins of Stalingrad. Today, historians still debate many aspects of the battle, but one thing is certain: Stalingrad was one of the most brutal and decisive battles in human history. A battle where hundreds of thousands of soldiers fought and died among shattered buildings and frozen streets. A battle that destroyed one of Hitler's greatest armies. And a battle that helped decide the outcome of World War II. History is written in fire, steel, and sacrifice. Across centuries, soldiers have marched into the unknown, through frozen cities, burning battlefields, and the chaos of war, shaping the world we live in today. Here on Wounds of War, we return to those battlefields, to uncover the battles that changed empires and the men who fought them. But every campaign needs its ranks. So if you want to march deeper into history, join us. Subscribe to the channel, because many more battles await, and the next story of war is just over the horizon.